Just
On record now.
all right. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the Lincoln City Budget Committee meeting. It is 5:04, and I'd like to call to order this meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Dick Anderson.
Yes.
Larry Armstrong. Judy Casper. Here. Estelle Harlan. Here. Deanna Hinton.
Here.
Riley Hoagland.
Here.
Kevin Hohenbaum. Here. Diane Coos is excused. Rick Mark.
Here.
Chester Norikis.
Here.
Nancy Oxenholt.
Here.
Mitch Parsons.
Here.
Elaine Sturmer.
Here.
And Susan Walke.
Here.
Wonderful. Good evening. Thank you for attending. Thank you for watching. And this will be our last meeting. 11:30 is the deadline tonight, so... oh, no, sorry. No, not 11:30 is not. Anyway, so I know we have one motion. We have one committee member that would like to make a motion. Before we go through the review process, I'd just like to give you a little time, Mr. Chandler.
Could I ask one favor?
You may ask.
That you wait on that motion because it may end, we may end up discussing that motion as we go forward. Is that okay?
I don't know. I don't know. I was simply asked
Okay.
to provide opportunity.
It's up to you, Chair. If you want to go through the motion, that's fine.
I'm hoping that the motion will facilitate our process of going through the wish list. Does that,
That's fine.
all
I'm
right,
good.
Mr. Chandler?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. So it's continuing from the last meeting that we had. So we're at this place here. So if you'd like to do that now, Mr. Norikis.
Yes, please. As recommended by the city manager, I move to leave the $500,000 of discretionary revenue in the facilities capital fund.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We have discussion. Discussion.
Let me share with the committee the email I received from Mr. Chandler regarding my proposal. There are two reasons for this, for leaving the money in the fund. First, $500K may seem like a lot, but it goes quick. I would prefer, Mr. Chandler would prefer building that up so we can use it on a significant project. Secondly, and more importantly, there are a few issues the City Council is still discussing and on which they haven't come to an agreement. These include workforce housing and transitional housing. He would like to see Council reach an agreement and then amend the budget so as to meet their goals. Thank you.
All right. Any other further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I have a question. So is that amount sort of sum and substance of what we have to talk about
Yes.
here tonight?
From that fund.
That fund.
From that fund.
But
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
We have a list of 15, plus there was an added item from the city of Newport. Would this decision affect number 9 and number 15, or not necessarily?
I believe it would.
as I understand it, it would forestall a decision on those items, basically move that discussion to City Council. Is that
Correct.
Would it impact any of the other items on the 1 through 15 list?
I think it would impact them all.
Not quite, but many of them, yes.
Wait a minute.
It would mean that if you would want to pass one of the items on the list that has that source as a funding, that you'd have to find another funding source to be able to pass it.
Including the marijuana tax?
No.
No, because that's a transfer of revenue.
Yeah, it
That's
would
on the
not-
list, too.
it would not.
it would be
Which
referring to
items?
sorry, it would be referring to expenses, not to incoming funds.
Mr. Chandler, could you go over which of the 15 items would be affected by this motion, please?
It might be easier for me to go through all 15, and then you can get you would get a better idea of where we're actually talking about those funds to come out of for each item.
As it's, do we have a motion on the floor, and it's, you know, we're in this deliberation as far as what we're to do here, and it's pertinent to understand that.
So it could affect the 152,000 of the marijuana funds.
Good.
It could. There were 3 separate options that pertain to that, and so it dealt with one of those options. It would affect number 8, Portland Lou. It would affect number 9, workforce housing. It would affect streets, number 11. No, I'm sorry, not number 11. It would affect number 13. And it would affect number 15. Debbie, make sure I got that right. 1 would not, 2 would not. Use debt service, use contingency and street. 3 would not. Number 6. Actually, it would not affect 5, 6, or 7. Would not affect 4, would not affect 5, 6, or 7, would affect 8, would affect 9. Does it affect, it could affect 10.
Could affect 10.
Depending on the choice that you want to make. It could affect 10. Does not affect 11. Does not affect 12. Does affect, could affect 13.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see.
Does not affect 14. Does affect 15. And, yeah.
What was the one that we were handed to today?
County's request.
What was the county's request? To do what?
It would not affect the county's request for
Counties or the
$28,000.
Newport?
Or,
I'm sorry, Newport's request. It would not affect Newport's request.
Mr. Chairman?
yes, sir.
So, Mr. Chandler, if we vote no on this motion, we'll still be going through all 15 of these items, and we could vote no on them one at a time. Am I correct?
Yes, you could approach it by addressing each one individually, or you could do as you're doing now and try to have one motion upon which 8 people have to vote yes. Now, what my plan had been to do in this is that I'd been asked what is staff's recommendation as it pertains to all 15 of these. What committee member Norikis spoke about was specifically the facilities capital fund. And that is my recommendation, that we don't use those funds for the reasons that I gave to him in that email. But there are some other items in here where I think we could do them if you wanted to, but they would not affect the facilities capital fund. But as it pertains to the facilities capital fund, that is my recommendation, and it was mentioned for 2 reasons. One is that projects are expensive. $500,000 seems to be a lot, but it really isn't. That's the lesser of the 2 reasons. The more important reason is that the City Council has several items in which they have been discussing They have not come to an agreement. Those have the potential of being $500,000 plus, and they are tied very closely to their priorities, but as of yet have not come to a conclusion on those. And so my recommendation is that the council needs to come to a conclusion and direction on those priorities before we try to expend those funds, because they are directly tied to what the city council is discussing now.
Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I thought in the budget that any questions that went to you and were answered were supposed to be presented to the whole committee.
I think I did present those in the memo that I put out as far as possible motions to make. I did not copy everybody on the email that Mr. Norika sent.
And then, so what you're in essence saying is that the budget committee would not vote on any of the $500,000, you're giving it to the council to vote on.
What I'm saying, my recommendation is to leave it as is, so that the funds simply go into the fund balance. If the council chooses at a later time to use those for something else, they would be able to do so.
Do you have any further questions? Sure.
What would that make the total fund balance?
Capital fund, wherever that is.
Sure, this is ending. Resources.
Total fund balance.
Can you tell us what page you're on to, Mr. Chandler?
No, I'm sorry, that's the next one. As soon as I get to the right page.
62 and 63.
Thank you.
The total fund balance that is contained, the total fund balance is $1,198,366.
Without the 500 or with the 500?
That's with the 500 in it. So that's the amount as proposed.
But remember, Mr. Chair, that balance is meant to also pay the debt service on the police. So the reason we came to the 500 was subtract 700,000.
We needed the
And-
5 to pay for the.
No, we needed the 6 or 7
Oh.
to pay for the debt service, and that left 5 in the contingency.
So yeah,
Any further-
it's dedicated then, even though it's in the contingency.
So by voting yes, we're saying those projects that you said it could be affected will not be discussed.
No,
At
they
this
will
time.
still be discussed, but you'd have to find a different source for the expenditures to make them happen. Either a new source of revenue or a decrease in expenditure somewhere else.
Yes, ma'am.
So that would mean, in effect, that it lessens the possibility that these items would find funding, since the pool for that funding is going to shrink dramatically.
Yes, as far as the likelihood goes, but not the impossibility, because again, the budget, if you increase one expense, you can decrease another expense.
Or at city council level, we will say then at that time, as city council, yes, we will do this, and this is the funding source being in this, amount, in this fund.
Yes, sir.
So we're just not approving it as budget committee. We're just saying, yes, here is the money to do the projects, hoping city council will say, yes, we also want to, those are in line with our projects that we wish to do.
We can reach in for anything to get to the.
But just
yeah,
as an overarching
exactly.
thing, it's not a no, we won't do it. It's, we're going to put the money so city council can direct the projects.
Less restrictions on it.
Correct.
This time.
And less input from the community members of the budget committee.
Sure, at that point, yeah. Right.
And at this point.
If it's passed. Any further discussion? All right. I think we should probably do a roll call on this one.
We didn't have a second?
Yeah,
Yeah, we did.
Mr. Anderson?
Oh, okay, excuse me. I did not hear a second.
I'll speak up.
Anderson,
Yes.
Armstrong,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Harlan. Yes. Hinton, Yes. Hoagland?
Yes.
Hohenbaum?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
Norikis?
Yes.
Oxenholt?
No.
Parsons?
Yes.
Starmer?
No.
Walke?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. So now, Mr. Chandler.
Okay, so I'm going to go through each of the 15 items, and these will be modified based upon the vote that you just took. And I was specifically asked what would be the staff's recommendation. In each of these funding source, I will be working off of this sheet, okay? I put a paper one in front of you. You also had it in your packet. Does anybody need one of these sheets to work off of? Okay.
That's the funding source detail
Funding
headline.
source detail. I will also, up on the board, be tracking this using the tracking sheet that I had sent to you. The first column has the column D shows a list, column E shows what a staff recommendation would be, and column F will ultimately be what you approve. This is broken out, this sheet, this tracking sheet is broken out basically by where money is available based on our last discussion. So for example, unrestricted resources that are available for changes in the budget, those are ones that are not tied to a specific fund or a specific revenue that has restrictions on it, such as transient room tax. They're available for all of your items to discuss, and they include the marijuana tax revenue, a reduction in the general fund transfer to capital facilities, which is $500,000. We have budgeted in the general fund a contingency amount of $2 million. We looked at that closely. We looked back through the history and said, are we budgeting too much at the contingency? And we felt that based on the history, we could look at $200,000 that could be available for that. And then the final thing is the general fund, unappropriated fund balance. In the past, the City Council and the Budget Committee have been working off of the policy that we would keep that at $6 million. That's actually $6.1 million. So we looked at it and said, okay, there's an additional $102,000 that could be available to use. So let me begin then first by just going down off this sheet 1 through 15. The first item that we had was to add an abandonment of vehicles to the police budget. We had two options that would be available for there. The first option A is one that you've taken off the table, which is to increase the budget by reducing the transfer to the capital facilities fund. That's now off the table. We would not have proposed that one anyways. We would have proposed item number B, that if you are interested in this, we would reduce the contingency fund balance. So what you see at this point here, you're showing there's item number 1, $10,000, and then it becomes part of the ongoing effect of the change to the general fund. And you'll see the accumulation of that. The second item was item number 2, which is add incentives to the emergency preparedness. We again had two options. Option A is now off the table, which would be to reduce the transfer from the general fund to the capital facilities fund. Instead, and we wouldn't have recommended that anyways, instead we are recommending that if you, everything I'm going to say is if you want to do this, okay? It's up to you on whether or not you want to do this. We feel this is one that can easily be absorbed without too much difficulty in the budget.
Or it could be.
Pardon me?
Or it could be reduced to 5,000 and then still
Or it could be
absorbed.
changed.
It's-
Yes,
yeah.
ma'am. And so the recommendation we would have would be option B, which again reduces, option B is at this point, and it again reduces the general fund unappropriated fund balance. Item number 3.
Mr. Chandler,
Yes, sir.
with these options, option B, we've got two columns. One is a 10,000 in black and another one's 10,000 in red.
Yeah, these are really based on debit and credits, and so that for the columns that are have the black and red are really for the ease of Debbie and I, so that we know that this expense will increase and this expense will decrease.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Item number 3, I need to come down a little bit, is is to purchase the street sweeper outright instead of using a capital lease. The budgeted amount for purchasing it is $280,000. This is one we felt like we could accommodate if the budget committee so desires, and that would affect the street operations. Essentially what we would be doing is to reduce the contingency by $224,000 and then eliminating the debt service of $56,000. And so that's one. What the end result of this is that it would drop the street operations contingency down to $648,785. The reason why we felt we could do this is that would still keep us above the $600,000 level that we have been working under that policy.
And Mr. Chandler, for this and the hydro excavator truck, both of these, the benefit of buying them outright versus lease to own is what?
Well, there's some interest savings that you would have on it, and then it also doesn't tie up operational expenses.
What was
for
the
next
interest
5
savings?
years. It would be $11,000 over 5 years.
For the water one, it was about 27,000. The street is actually a little bit less. Purchase price is 240, so it'd be a little bit less than that.
Less than 27?
Yeah, maybe 23, maybe.
The next item that we had is item number 4, which is purchasing the hydro excavator truck instead of outright, instead of using it a capital lease. We would not recommend this. We recommend going forward with the purchase. The question that was posed to me over the course of the last couple of weeks is, can we get by without purchasing it? Especially given the fact that we are not applying any of the rate increases to the water fund. Could we go another year without purchasing it? Well, the answer is sure, but that's not what we would recommend doing. There's some benefits when we don't have the hydro excavator truck using, and that essentially is if there's a water break, we dig the hole, you're going to be pumping out stuff. It's going to have a lot of rock. It's going to have debris as well as water. What we will do now is use the Vector truck that's part of the wastewater or sewer system program. One is designed to be beat up a lot more by rocks than the other, and so we really would prefer not to have to use the Vector truck that's meant to work on wastewater systems to be sucking up all the debris that comes out of a water break. Okay.
So that would be a real hardship on the truck.
It would. Mm-hmm. And that's why we prefer that of going forward with purchasing it, not putting as much pressure on this year's fund balance, but also having the option, the lease is structured so that we can pay it off early if we so choose. And so it keeps the option of paying it off early, but we still want to go forward with the purchase of it, but would prefer doing it through a lease as the budget proposes. Okay. There were 3 proposals on the marijuana tax, number 5, 6, and 7. Let me address each of those. The available funds from the marijuana tax is budgeted at $152,888. Right now, it's in what we call an inactive account, which means it doesn't really have an expense tied to it. That works well right now because it's still a new revenue, and it's not one we've grown dependent upon within our budget. This last year, we budgeted $85,000 for it, and we're going to be coming in somewhere around $150,000. The first item was to devote $152,888 to parks. There are actually two proposals that were associated with one dealt with only this year, the other dealt with future budget decisions by tying it to parks over a 10-year period. That one we would, at this point in time, I would not recommend doing that. Number 6 is to devote the marijuana tax to workforce housing and I'll kind of leave it at that point. At that point, again, that is another one I would not propose doing at this point. And the third one is to devote marijuana tax to provide free youth programs and memberships. That actually would be about $55,000. We were asked if we provided scholarships, and the answer is yes. In 2018, we provided 32 youth scholarships totaling $1,644, and in 2019, we provided 49 youth scholarships totaling $2,112.
Chair, was that for day camp or for sports?
I have no idea.
Sport leagues only. Now, and I would not recommend doing that one either. And this comes back for the same reason that I don't recommend using any of the facilities capital funds. The council is still working on projects that the ultimate price of those projects or projects has not been determined, and this $152,000 combined with the amount in the capital facilities fund would give us the flexibility we need to try and be able to meet those priorities that the council is working on. So that is the reason why I would not propose using those funds.
Mr. Chair,
Sir.
you're recommending a no vote on all three of those?
I am, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Item number 8 was to construct a Portland Loo. I really like this idea. Matter of fact, I'm quite enamored by the idea of a Portland Loo.
It's just like the model.
Yeah, the model. That's one of my favorite pictures. However, the cost is $150,000. The funding that I would see to use that is the capital facilities fund, but that has been taken off the table. I would not have recommended this anyway because as I spoke with our Public Works Department, particularly our city engineer, about this, we have, as a staff, we've all been really interested in this idea of a Portland Loo. But her recommendation, and I really like this recommendation, is that we have some bathrooms that are in serious need of some major repairs over the next 2 to 3 years. One of those is probably going to have to be replaced. So the question is that rather than put another toilet right next to existing bathroom facilities, could this become a replacement and an option for an option instead of a traditional cinder block? So I like pursuing that idea rather than $150,000 to just put another bathroom next to a bathroom. So I like the idea of going forward at some point in time to consider a Portland Loo, but do it as part of the maintenance process for our existing 17 bathrooms that we have.
Mr. Chair. So then, what you're saying, then that cost would be absorbed through that process rather than through this process?
Yes, ma'am.
But
Yeah, so
we're
for
still
example,
gonna
if
that.
next year or the year after we knew we were going to have to replace a bathroom, we would be considering a Portland Loo in its place.
And a foot wash.
Foot wash is.
Don't forget the foot wash.
I have not forgotten the foot washes.
Okay.
Okay. I did address that, the foot wash, in my letter. That's going to need a little bit more time for us to look at what is the cost of adding a foot wash to any given ones of our bathrooms. So we're, as a staff, we will use that information to bring back for a future budget, but we're just not prepared for that kind of a budget now, to look at that now. Number 9 is a facility purchase for workforce housing of $500,000. Again, I do not propose doing that at this time because the council that would be affected by the facilities capital fund, which is now off the table. But I would not propose doing that at all at this time because, again, the city council is still trying to work through their priorities. At some point in time, when those projects that they're working on come to fruition, then they will have to make some adjustments in the budget. Number 10 is design for sidewalk construction of $335,000. For that one, we looked at the street capital fund. Let me bring that down here. In this case, there were two options that were available. One was option A was to use reserve future funds for future years in the street capital fund, and B, which is now off the table, which would be used in the capital facilities fund. On this one, I would not propose doing this, but for a different reason. And that is that this is a 2-year, this is design work for future projects. And as we looked at what happens in the future years, it affects it would affect some of the street projects that we have, such as the overlay projects. We have established as a priority for the city, and one I agree with, is that the street overlay and the street improvements would be our most important street efforts. And so it's not that this isn't worthwhile, and it's not even that it's the capital fund, but it affects future projects. And without a change from the city council as to what their priorities are, I would continue to recommend that the funding priorities go first to street asphalt improvements before sidewalks.
Mr. Chandler, I believe also part of that request, or part of that suggestion on that, was a proposal to pass on to City Council the proposal to ask for a gas tax to go specifically for street overlays and street repairs.
It is, and that's the other part that I was coming to address, is that whether or not that is in there or not, I think that looking at a gas tax is a worthwhile thing to do. As we talked about our budget projections, the street capital's budget was settling in at about $800,000 a year as how much would be available. Again, that's not a lot of money when you're starting to talk about it. So whether or not the $335,000 is in there or not, then I would recommend doing that. Now, if you want to go forward with this project, I would most definitely recommend looking at a gas tax as a way to use either for sidewalk designs or for overlay construction or something like that. The only hesitation that I would make on that at this point is that it would be nice to have the tax in place before you commit the spending. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Just, Mr. Chandler, just in general terms, when we're setting priorities for these street overlay projects, does the condition of the sidewalks come into play at all? And would it make sense to do that?
For strictly overlays, no. But we also do a lot of street reconstruction. That usually is going to involve multiple funds. It often involves water, sewer, street funds. Most definitely when we do storm drain projects, that's going to include sidewalks. So the straight overlay does not But there are other projects that are on our list to do that would.
Mr. Chair. Also, when we were going through the prioritizing of the sidewalks before, and we were asking questions about how much capacity our staff has to look at our future budgeting for those projects. I thought we're now at capacity, and to add more projects to that would mean the projects that we've already prioritized would fall off.
It could, but a lot of our projects, we do contract out for the design work, so it could, but I would expect that on these projects, we'd probably contract them out, but that does include monitoring and everything else. So yes, it could have an effect on our capacity to get it done. Now, the downside of not doing this, if this is a project that you want to do, these sidewalk projects, and these were 3 projects on Highway 101 that we were talking about. If you want to do this, they are 2-year projects, and so that essentially pushes us back at least a year, because it takes a year to do the design work, the permitting, and everything else. So that's the downside of waiting. So if this is a really big priority, you just have to know that if you adopt it, you're going to be committing funds next year for the completion of this sidewalk. If you don't adopt it, it means that you're going to be pushing this back, so the completion of it won't happen for a 2-year period. So that's the downside of doing it. And as I mentioned, although the budget committee can't include a gas tax in the budget, they can make a recommendation to the city council, and I do think that is a worthwhile consideration. Okay. The next item we had was number 11, increased outside agency requests. Again, that is one we look to the general fund unappropriated fund balance of $50,000. We should say that the budget calls it outside agency requests. It's now called nonprofit requests or applications, and we felt that the unappropriated fund balance could absorb that if this is something you're interested in. Item number 12 was $3,500 for neighborhood watch sign. We can absorb that into our existing sign budget, so that's not a problem in doing that. Sidewalk on Southeast Orr Avenue, $150,000. Again, there were 2 options associated with this. Option A affected the facilities capital fund, so that one is off the table. The other one is to decrease the street overlay expenditure project and increase the sidewalk construction projects. This one is not trying to pull it out of future years. This would actually be taking it out of the overlay budget that we have this year. And I would not recommend doing that. Number 14 is a facilities-wide, to facilitate a county-wide climate action plan of $10,000. This was a request that was made by one of our citizens. I have a slight change to this, not a change necessarily where the funding comes from, but where you'd put this expenditure. Part of this is based on the fact that a group has made a request, and as a staff, we don't know anything about this group. We don't know anything that they're doing. But there seemed to be some interest in your part on pursuing it. So what I would recommend on this is that, again, we would take this out of the unappropriated fund balance and put $10,000 into the city council's budget under an expenditure that just is titled studies. And then that gives the city council the ability to pursue that as they learn more about this organization or another organization similar to it. Number 15 was purchase of cottage cluster development of $800,000. I would not support doing that. for a very much a non-budgetary reason. This is a request to purchase land to use to create workforce housing. The city already has land, and if the Budget Committee and the City Council wanted to pursue the creation of cottage clusters, I would much rather use the $800,000 for something other than purchasing land, because we already own land that can be used. Then there were two other items that came up. One came up in the your last meeting, and one has come up since then. Committee member Anderson had asked about the chemicals in the recreation and why those were so high. If you had a chance to go and back into the Northwest Conference Room and look at the whiteboard, that was our tutorial lesson in chemicals and chemistry. We did budget too high for that. It was a very nice catch. We do propose reducing that by $5,000 and bringing it down in line with what the cost was a couple of years ago. It probably will come in less than that. We have a lot of new people that are working at our community center, and they're bringing in some expertise with this, and so there will be a refining process. So I'm expecting it to come in probably a little bit less, but I can't venture a guess as to how much less. And then finally, we received a letter from Newport. I received this on Tuesday. I have to admit, I have to chide my colleague for submitting this so late in the process. But we did receive this on Tuesday. It is a request for $28,000 for helping to fund the Mid-Coast Water Planning Partnership. That is an organization we're a part of. It is one that our city engineer has been working closely with, and it has 3 or 4 different parts that they are that they have been working on, and there's some good work that has come out of it. However, there's a lot of questions associated with this letter. How has money been used in the past? What is the $28,000 going to be used for in the future? What I would recommend on doing this, I think it is worthwhile to budget the $28,000, but I would not commit to paying the $28,000 until after Newport has a chance to come and explain what they're really asking to the City Council, and then they can make a determination. But again, it's an organization we've been involved with. They're doing good work. So what we would be proposing in that is that we put up into contracted services of $28,000 and lessen $28,000 out of the fund balance. So,
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I was hesitant to allocate that money until I looked again at the council's priorities, and one of the council's priorities is expand water capacity by working on a regional approach, and this seems to fill that priority.
so all in all, in the end, with the staff's recommendations, what you see on this is $80,000, which affects unappropriated fund balance, and the street operations of the purchase of the street sweeper. All of the rest, we did not allocate, or we did not propose to allocate those expenses.
Yes, ma'am. Or, sir.
One just quick clarification, Mr. Chandler, on the action plan, sorry, lost the word.
Climate?
Thank you. The climate action plan. The letter was not about a county-wide group. It was about a local, it was a city group. It was for money spent specifically in this jurisdiction. That was the way the letter was written anyway.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chandler, could you reiterate your position on that Newport proposal regarding water retention?
I would budget $28,000, but I would ask the council to not commit to spend it until after Newport comes and gives more information as to how that money will be used and answers any other questions.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions regarding the
Mr. Chair.
17 items?
Mr. Chair, I had a question about number 1. You recommend, or this recommends 10,000 to add to abandoned vehicles. How many vehicles have we had to deal with in the past, and how many vehicles would this 10,000 cover? Would 5,000 do any good?
The answer that I had received from our code enforcement officer was it has not been a lot that we have actually had to expend in the past, under $3,000 a year.
Under 3, you said?
Yeah. However, there are a lot that we haven't gone after.
Okay.
And so his feeling was that we could spend up to that amount if we really pursue the abandoned vehicles.
I did notice that in the council priorities, it says prioritize nuisances to enforce, i.e. abandoned vehicles. So abandoned vehicle enforcement is on the council priority list.
Mr. Chandler, would it, in an effort to, I know other cities have contracted services with particular tow companies that will, the city tells them where these abandoned vehicles are and they pick them up and take them to their lot and process them that way. Is this what that money is for, to pay them, or we're actually doing something different?
No, this would be to pay them.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I was a curious person on this item, and just moving an RV is $1,500. So it's an expense, and so we've had to absorb that in the
I remember
previous
the
years.
chief was saying it's cubic feet for RVs. And,
Right.
Right, not weight. Okay. Any other further questions? I mean, if we're now to the point of making motions to,
You have a couple of options that's available to you. Actually, probably many options, but I'll give you a couple of options. You could try to fashion one motion, and then a discussion, and 7 people have to agree with however that motion went.
Sure.
Or you could address each item individually, as we have done in the past.
and then we still need the tax levy and the sewer bond. So
Yes, sir.
that's two motions we still need as well.
Yes, sir.
So I would entertain individual motions for each individual thing. If there's someone who'd like to speak about the number one.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
we have a motion and a second on the table already.
No, for what?
We're holding back that
So
contingency.
that we have voted on that.
I forgot.
It's all right.
It's not even 10 o'clock yet.
That's fine.
my friend. I have no excuse.
More coffee. Yes, sir.
Are you thinking going one at a time, or could I
Yeah,
just?
I would
just throw
prefer,
something
yeah,
out here?
I
Okay.
would prefer.
But not necessarily in order.
Sure, right.
Whichever one you.
Whoever, right.
Okay.
If there's
Chair,
something that,
Then if I could, I would like to move that we accept the staff recommendation on 5, 6, and 7, the marijuana tax, and not designate that money for a particular use at this time.
Second.
been motion and a second,
Mr. Chair,
sir.
I would disagree. I don't have a problem with 6 and 7. The problem I do have is parks, and parks seem to be a high priority for the community. It's even on the council priority list. We're buying, we've got money put aside to buy the old Taft property, and there's nothing worse than just letting it sit after we buy it without development. And granted, $152,000 isn't a lot of money, but it can be leveraged, and that would show a commitment to funders that the city is serious, not just owning the property, but putting money. So I think, the two options, I would have that one removed, 5 removed, if it could be, and then talk about it. What I heard staff say was not liking to commit a 10-year window of those funds, and I could understand that, but at least start with, perhaps the first year having it go towards park development of those 2 specific parks.
Sure.
So,
I also would like to keep them available. Speaking with the dispensaries, they know the amount of money that they have given and absolutely would like to see something specifically with that money that they've given.
so unless we can amend the motion, I would ask for a no vote on the motion too.
I'm not interested in amending.
Okay.
Okay.
Further discussion for this, removing 5, 6, and 7?
Yes, on number 7, the provide free youth programs. More people are calling for funds from nonprofits because they cannot afford to have their kids in sports. And I think that we need to put some money towards that for membership, for they can, school sports or summer sports. I still think there needs to be some money into that.
Sure. I also agree with that and know the high cost associated, as I have 2 children and many other parents here, and there's a lot of things there. And, Mr. Parsons has, there's another that's not even covered by the city. What was the other sport?
I'm sorry, there's several.
Yeah, so there's not even, that are not even associated with the city at all, so.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Comment to Mayor Anderson's thought about this going to the parks. It may be a drop in the bucket to the parks, but it can be the whole bucket to some of these smaller things like the sports programs. So I'm in favor of making a big impact on a smaller item with this money.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir?
My feeling is on the marijuana tax, I'm voting no because I want to spend it. I'm more than willing to listen to what others have to say as how it should be spent, but I really want to spend this marijuana tax money. Yeah.
Okay. And this is a percentage, so it's not a set amount. So be advised that as more marijuana is sold, that number is going to be higher every year.
Wait, just a question on that, if I could, staff. Currently, so it's a question, currently marijuana tax goes into the general fund,
It does.
and it is being spent or via general fund.
6.5 dozen as to which revenue line item you're spending.
Right, but it's into the big pot. So it's not sitting aside waiting. These motions, potential motions, would direct the fund to a specific category.
So,
Chair, so the question I'm putting forth is, do we want to make a specific decision today, this body, or let City Council weigh all these other issues that they're weighing, so that I feel like the decision's being made in sort of a vacuum at this point without consideration of other elements.
Okay. Any further discussion? May we have a roll call, please?
Will you repeat the motion, Mr. Chair?
I believe Mr. Marks said that he would not like to have the marijuana tax put into any 3 of these. So it's a no on all of these. No, he does not want to devote the money to parks. No, he does not want the money to go to workforce housing. And no, he does not want it to provide free youth program memberships.
Thank you.
So a yes would say, no, you do not want. So if you wish to spend the money, if you wish to spend the money for one of these sort of programs, it is a no vote.
Or any other program.
Right.
Staff recommended that we not devote
Correct.
the tax, so
Correct.
that's my motion, is to support the staff recommendation.
Armstrong,
No.
Casper,
No.
Harlan, Hinton,
No.
Hoagland,
No.
Hohenbaum,
No.
Mark,
Yes.
Norikis,
No.
Oxenholt,
No.
Parsons,
No.
Starmer,
No.
Walke,
Yes.
and Anderson.
No.
Motion fails.
Right.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
can I offer a motion?
Well, may I ask, is it regarding this marijuana? Oh, yes, please.
I would move that we dedicate $55,079 of the marijuana tax to the free youth program memberships and the balance into the Parks Fund.
All right.
I second.
We have a motion and a second.
Discussion?
Discussion, yes. You go ahead.
Go ahead.
I would just like, instead of a dollar amount, because it may change, I would just like to see a percentage of, one versus the other. But I understand it could change, and this is just for the first year. So, in the future, that's all.
I was wondering if there could be a cap put on this amount. If you're going to put so much into youth sports and then make this the cap for this year. If marijuana comes in more next year, it goes into a special fund where it just sits there rather than spending it, because it might increase rather than spending all the money.
Right. I don't think that 55 is going to need to be spent. That's just the estimated cost.
No, but I thought you were saying to put the rest of the money toward parks,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
right? Isn't that what you said,
I see.
Kevin?
Right, okay. Okay.
And I'm saying to maybe cap that, and if there's any above this amount next year, that it goes into a fund.
By default, is this just for next year?
This
Mr.
is
Chair,
just
if
for
I
the
understood
2020
that- if I
budget.
So next year, we could make a different vote next year, but to keep in mind, yeah.
If I understood the suggestion, that it needs to be a percent, it's approximately 1/3 and 2/3, okay?
That was my consideration,
Okay.
not the motion. The motion is for the dollar amounts. I was just, as a discussion, instead of dollar amounts, percentages, but the motion is dollar amounts. No? Is it more confusing?
No, it's understood, but.
Okay,
yeah, that was-
okay.
that was the
Any
motion.
further discussion?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
The motion was the rest.
Balance.
Balance?
Are we assuming 152,888 as the total? So that if our marijuana tax this next year is actually 250,000, there's not going to be the rest into parks?
I would interpret that motion to be that whatever we get for a marijuana tax, I would put 55,000 in youth sports and the rest into parks.
That's, yeah, that's
Is
how
that,
I-
Yep. The motion was the balance.
the remainder of the revenue, so cover the 55 for the youth programs, and the remainder, correct, yes, sir.
clarification, did you
Fund.
want to specify whether it was for park improvements or
Park
anything
maintenance.
park?
Park improvements.
Park improvements.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Improvements includes development, right?
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
more capital.
could we consider, before we lock ourselves into that motion, can we consider dividing the money between workforce housing and the sports?
Well, that's your consideration. Mr. Helmbaum would like to amend your motion. No.
No, I'm not asking him to amend the motion, I'm just saying, can we have that discussion before we lock ourselves in, or is that procedurally not allowed?
Correct. We're in the motion
Okay.
as is. All right, Mr. Anderson.
Now I forgot where I was going to go. The,
Mr. Anderson.
I apologize, because that was interesting on Kevin. Oh, I know. So the motion to put some into the, specifically the recreation program, sounds good, But am I missing the point somewhere that the citizens' tax dollars already go heavy into community programs, because only 40% of the user fees cover the community center activities? So 60% of the total cost of existing programs are already supported by non-users, by taxpayers. So I guess I'm, not that it isn't a nice deal, but you're talking almost like, there's no money there and there isn't anything being done in that area by the city as a whole, and there is quite a bit.
My motion addresses specifically youth program memberships. It doesn't fees. It doesn't talk about the community center. It doesn't talk about anything else we're spending to support that or tax money. It's specifically, if you want to sign your grandkid or your kid up for one of the youth sports, that city-run youth sports, it pays for it.
So,
It's
Mr.
how
Chair,
money's spent.
again, wouldn't that come back then to the nonprofit fund that they would apply for?
They're-
Boosters or?
No,
Okay.
they're not, those are not separate. Those are separate.
Okay.
One does not handle the other one. No. The scholarships could also, I can't speak to the scholarships, but those boosters doesn't go to that same.
So, again, I'm just thinking through the mechanics. You'd write a check to a school or something, and they would just cover, who would be asking for money and how?
There would be no entrance, there would be no fees associated with signing your child up for sports and activities in the city of Lincoln City.
So you'd write a check to the schools?
No, it's the city. It's the city.
It would be a revenue that would go away.
Okay.
So the
Sort of-
Because now-
55,000 is a revenue. And so essentially what happens, the revenue goes away, and then that means the expenses are covered.
Gotcha. So
It would be
these
like-
youth sports are paying some kind of fee to the city, and that would no longer be?
Correct.
Youth sports are youth individuals.
Gotcha.
And so
Different
that
from the
revenue, so
community
what
center.
essentially happens is the revenue goes away.
Gotcha.
How many youngsters does that cover?
Well, however many thousands of kids are participating.
Is this just for city-run youth sports?
Because there is that second
Because
question.
Everything else is a nonprofit, and
Right.
This would be for the sports this would be for the activities that are paid to the city.
So if there's a youth football league, do they pay the city? Oh, okay. Okay. All right, further discussion? Ms. Steer, would you please do a roll call?
Once again, could you repeat the motion, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. The motion is to devote $55,079 to the youth program membership, and the remainder of the proposed, the anticipated tax revenue from marijuana sales to go to the parks maintenance fund. I'm sorry.
Improvement.
Improvement fund, I'm sorry, sir.
Thank you.
Boy.
I'm sorry.
that
I'm
was-
sorry. I know, that was
that
almost a
close.
whoopsie there.
That was
Head cut off
close.
on that one. Ms. Steer, please.
Harlan,
yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hohenbaum,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Norikis,
Yes.
Oxenholt,
Yes.
Parsons,
yes.
Starmer,
Yes.
Walke,
No.
Anderson,
Yes.
Armstrong,
Yes.
and Casper. No. Motion carries.
All right. Is there some other motions members would like to make? May I do a double, if there isn't one, may I do a double motion of, I'd like to make a motion to reduce the debt service and use contingency and street operations fund for the purchase of the street sweeper, and reduce the debt service and use contingency of the water fund for the purchase of the hydro excavator.
Doing
Second.
both street
No, one of
and
those
water
wasn't
together?
to
I'm
purchase.
sorry, what?
You're doing both street and water in one motion?
I did not hear you again.
I'm sorry, your motion is to buy both the street sweeper and the water?
Correct, that was the recommendation of staff, correct?
No, staff was to buy this sweeper, but to lease the hydro vector because of the
It says
impact. of-
purchase instead of capital lease on both of these.
Yeah, but that
We
was, that
changed
was
it.
what the
Oh.
motion was, but what his recommendation
Purchase
The
the
original
sweeper.
motion, the original proposal from somebody on the council was purchase.
Oh,
Mr. Chandler said the staff recommendation is
oh,
lease.
okay,
So,
And buy the purchases.
okay.
so if you purchase number 3, then you won't make Ron crazy.
I like making Ron crazy.
No, but.
All right,
you
so
know,
may I don't know if there was a second, but I'd like to amend. Was there? No
Yes,
second.
Yeah, I second it.
Second, okay.
Chester.
I would like to amend it to be the purchase and lease to own.
Purchase of the street sweeper and lease the hydro excavator.
I believe is that correct, Mr. Chandler?
It is.
Yes, I'd like to make that amendment.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second.
So it's my understanding that the purchase of the hydro excavator truck, no. The lease of the hydro excavator truck is already in the budget.
Yes.
So the only change we're making to the proposed budget is to purchase the street sweeper instead of leasing it.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's a savings of estimated $26,000 in tax service.
For this, probably more like 23.
23. All right. Have a discussion on this motion?
Chair and Mr. Chandler or Mrs. Bridges, just again, so that lump, that 280,000 for the street sweeper is then drawn from the contingency, and there's room in that.
Yeah, and it's actually 240,000, but yes, there is room in the contingency. The remaining contingency will be the 648,000 in the street operations, and it will not affect any planned future capital.
Further discussion? Ms. Steer, may I have a roll call, please?
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hohenbaum,
Yes?
Coos, oh, I'm sorry, Mark,
Yes.
Norikis,
Yes?
Oxenholt,
Yes.
Parsons,
Yes.
Starmer,
Yes.
Walke,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Armstrong,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
and Harlan. Motion carries.
If I may, just, is there anyone who would like to make a motion for item number 1?
Yes, I would.
Ms. Walke, please.
I would like to increase the police budget, reducing the fund balance contingency to add abandonment of vehicles to the police budget in the amount of $10,000.
Second.
Ms. Hinton, second. All right, we have a motion and a second. We have discussion. All right, may we have a roll call, please, Ms. Steer?
Hohenbaum,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Norikis,
Yes?
Oxenholt,
Yes.
Parsons,
Yes.
Starmer,
Yes.
Walke,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Armstrong,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Harlan, Hinton,
Yes.
and Hoagland.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Wonderful. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion for item number 2, add the incentives to the emergency preparedness in the amount, in that amount?
Mr. Chair,
Oh, let's have the question first.
I was wondering, Mr. Chandler, could you just remind us what is meant by incentives? The emergency, what is this for?
I think it was actually proposed, that word came from the person who proposed it, the budget committee member.
Oh, okay.
So we do not have to make this motion.
Mr. Chandler said that this can be absorbed into the existing budget that he's prepared, so we don't need a separate motion. Is that correct?
Not the 10,000.
Oh. 5,000?
5,000 could be absorbed into it, but 10,000 we would need a motion.
This was my idea, so could I reduce it to 5,000 and just have it within the budget and no motion needed? Thank you.
I'd agree to that.
What does it mean?
Says police budget.
So the easiest way to determine is swag. So as our emergency preparedness employee is going out and working with organizations on helping them learn how to become preparedness, this would be things that he could use swag's not a good word because that usually
Let's
means,
talk,
that usually means,
T-shirt cannon.
that usually means trinkets, but it's more than trinkets.
it's like a water filter, a go bag.
Increasing our resilience.
Get it moving here.
Right, wonderful.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so $5,000,
In the
no motion
neighborhoods.
needed.
Thank you.
Wonderful. 3 and 4 are covered, 5, 6, and 7 are done. We are now at number 8. Is there anyone who'd like to go against Mr. Chandler's recommendation?
Whoa. I'm not sure about that wording, but.
Oh, you like that one, Mr. Chandler?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
can you tell us what we think the projected timeline is to have our Portland Lou? If we have to wait for a
It'll be a
broken
Lincoln
down
City, Lou.
bathroom?
We tear down half of it.
I don't have a
Lincoln City Lou.
specific time, but I'm probably guessing in the next 2 years. 2 to 3 budget cycles, to be fair on that.
You get an invention, Mr. Chandler, the Lincoln City Lou. Cut holes in the brick and call it good.
We'll call it the Lincoln City Water
Spray and
Closet.
go.
Spray and go.
What, you guys, that's what it is. It's a top selling point. Spray it down. Anyway. All right, so now we're at number 9, facility for purchase for workforce housing. We had a no from staff. Anyone like to talk about that? Very good. We have 10.
I would like to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
I would move that we spend $335,000 for designing sidewalk construction along Highway 101 and reducing the future year's street capital fund to make that happen.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir.
can you, are we on number 10?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Is that A or B?
I believe that's A. Right.
I second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. We have some discussion on this.
I think that kicking it out another 2 years to get sidewalks going on Highway 101 is waiting too long. I think it's dangerous, and I think it doesn't represent our city very well when you have places where there aren't sidewalks in the city. I know one of those places is, that's proposed is connecting there along in front of the theater up to, from the little theater up to the movie theater, and that along through there where there's it's just crazy.
The High School Drive to 32nd.
People walking up there at night, and I think it's insane that we don't make that a top priority. Yeah.
But this is at the expense of the road overlay, correct?
No, this is at the expense of the reserve for future years in the street fund.
Mr. Chair.
So it doesn't touch the street overlay.
It doesn't touch the overlays that are budgeted for the reduced reserve.
Mr. Chair?
One moment, Ms. Wolke. Mr. Chandler, if we can just confirm, the discussion was it only affects the reserve for future years account.
So we would suggest to fund this by reducing the reserve, which would pretty much, it puts the reserve about 27,000 so that there's, in the future, we're not carrying over any reserve into the future.
And to be clear, that fund is for what exactly?
Street capital is for overlays, for street improvements, sidewalks.
So it would affect overlays.
It could. It depends on what, it's going to affect something, an overlay or a street improvement in the future, not the 1920 year, but in future years.
Sure, I understand. And to be clear, that 335 is simply for design and to get the process going. There would still be another account, which we then, at that point, would need to fund that somehow.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I'm still not comfortable with the,
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. I'm saying, yes, go ahead.
the response to the question of whether or not it affects the street overlays was it could.
Well, there's two primary things that are done in the street capital fund. One is street overlays and one is street improvements. So it's going to affect one of the two or both. But it's a decision that the budget committee can make next year when they have to decide how to fund that.
Chair?
So,
One moment, Mr. Marks. It's Ms. Casper is after this. Miss, are you satisfied? Yes, ma'am.
That was my
Ms. Casper, please.
Yeah, I also want to point out that The Oregon Department of Transportation has initiated safe routes to school opportunities. I was just at a meeting last week, and there's now $1.8 million, and the deadline to apply for this is May 31st. And we'd had our eye on getting some of those routes up by High School Drive covered under this grant. So I think this is a consideration to put on our to-do list.
Consideration to, yes, do the 335?
No, this would be,
You're speaking against it
yes.
because you believe that the grant,
We
have
could
we applied
utilize
for it?
this. Yes, we could utilize this grant.
Has anybody applied for it?
Do you know if the city?
Not from our city that I know.
Well, I think
The staff will help the city write the grant. Mr. Anderson, you are on the Transportation Committee. Did they?
Right. It has conditions and stuff, but it's available, and we've looked at it and have applied for it in the past. So, you know, we can. It's not a deadline yet on applying. So.
Last time we applied for it, they ran out of money.
Right.
Because we had our eye on the High School Drive and the one along Theater West. So
that's the projects that Mr. Holmbaum is asking.
It's
So, I
in
mean, it would
addition
fit
to.
right there.
Mr. Anderson, can you tell me if in that application process whether there's city funding match that needs to go for to get that grant?
You know, I'm going from memory. It's either 10 or 20%, something like that, usually on the ODOT STIPs.
Mr. Chandler, would that, if we said yes and applied for it, would we then, and was granted, what would then happen to that 335?
Well, if a match was required, it would probably go to
It
that
would go
match.
towards the
Just take
match.
that 30% out of that, and then the rest you would do an adjustment later on in the year? Okay. Well, I mean,
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any sidewalks budgeted for construction in our current proposed budget?
What we have in the 1920 budget are the continuations of ones that we started in this year, 1819. So yes, and they're listed on page 26, I think. So, I won't read them.
So,
So-
and then also, the question that has been asked is, what does that do next year? So just a reminder that this is design work for construction that would happen in the following year. The next year, we have budgeted, or we have projected $1,320,000. That would include $580,000 in street overlays and $740,000 in 3 projects. One of those is street flashing, South 3rd Street flashing beacon and plaza, Northwest Kill and Northwest Jetty storm improvements, and sidewalk construction, Northeast 6th Highway 101 to Mast Avenue. So you would then be weighing that $1.3 million with the cost of the projects we would be designing this year. So this is where you really get the trade-offs and the priorities and what you want to do. So
Is that island going to be on the north or south side of 3rd Street? Because you can't, well, you wouldn't be able to turn left, right? Right. Oh, it's just the beacon, okay.
Mr. Chair?
Sir?
I would remind or point out to this body that council has spent time on priorities for this coming year and certainly this budget. And I think when we were creating these priorities, we took into consideration or recognized that we had some big lifts to do financially. And we also knew that we had previous years spent a great deal of money on sidewalks. So it's not that sidewalks aren't important and closing the gaps aren't important. It's weighing, the priorities. And, the sidewalks, didn't
I just don't want to be, I think for me personally, I think Mr. Helmbaum also, I just don't want there not to be sidewalks going on the highway.
Right.
And that's,
That
however
is.
that has to be, as long as that's continuing and understanding that it takes 2 years to complete, we don't want to be 3 years out from that. So that's how all right. Any further discussion? Ms. Steer, can we have a roll call, please?
Mark?
No?
Norikis?
No.
Oxenholt?
Yes?
Parsons?
Yes.
Starmer?
No?
Walke?
No.
Anderson?
No.
Armstrong?
No.
Casper?
No.
Harlan? Hinton?
No.
Hoagland?
No.
And Hohenbaum?
Yes.
Motion fails.
All right. And we're looking at increasing the outside agency or the newly, what's it called? Nonprofit something?
Nonprofit expenditures?
Yes. Would someone like to make a motion to increase that budget?
I would move that we increase the outside agency nonprofit request budget from $50,000 to $100,000 by reducing the general fund unappropriated fund balance by $50,000.
Right. A motion and a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. We have for discussion? All right, Ms. Steer. Have a roll call, please.
Norikis?
No.
Oxenholt?
Yes?
Parsons?
No.
Starmer?
No?
Walke?
No.
Anderson?
No.
Armstrong?
No.
Casper?
No.
Harlan? Hinton?
No.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Hohenbaum?
Yes.
And Mark?
No.
Motion fails.
All right. Would someone like to talk about number 13? All right.
Mr. Chair, I don't want to make a motion, but just a comment on 13 is that I was talking to a neighbor in that area who, Councilor Hogan, at a recent meeting, suggested that possibly a crosswalk, just lines at Weimart there to get people
Some
to
paint
the
would be great.
other side of the side. There is a sidewalk on the other side of the street.
Right.
And the neighbor that I chatted with said they thought that would be.
Yeah, in a larger note, I think if we painted areas instead of making sidewalks, I think that would help people feel a little bit more safer too in just general, but I don't know what our budget is for that, but that's, at least it's, you can walk here. All right. Anybody would like to make a motion for 13? All right. Number 14, we have this, as Mr. Chandler further set aside to put it in the council budget, I believe?
City
Was
council
your
budget.
recommendation?
Yes, sir.
All right, so would there somebody like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right.
Mr. Hoagland, I'd like to move that we facilitate a citywide climate action plan by moving $10,000 into a fund called Studies, Council Discretionary Fund, and taking that from the general fund unappropriated fund balance.
Second.
We have Ms. Walke as the second there. Ms. Steer, the discussion?
Just a clarification on the motion, if I could. You're tying it specifically to an action plan, or I think staff talked about it being kind of a fund for committees, that if they, separate committees came to the council needing some money to do something, then there was a pot there. I only say that because we don't know anything about this action plan climate, so I would.
I think the intention was just that it would be in the fund called Studies, that if it comes back that they are something that we want to support, we can at that level through council.
From the motioner?
That's what it was. Yeah.
Well, I heard climate change.
Motion was specifically for a citywide climate
Yeah.
action plan, and I'll keep that motion as a citywide action climate plan because the city needs a climate action plan.
Further discussion.
There goes the Blazer game.
All right. Ms. Steer, may we have a vote, please? Ms. Steer.
I start this right. Starmer,
Yes.
Walke,
Yes.
Anderson,
No.
Armstrong,
No.
Casper,
No.
Harlan,
No.
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hohenbaum,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Norikis,
No.
Oxenholt,
Yes.
Yes.
Parsons,
That was 8.
we have 8. Motion fails, 7-6.
Yeah, it has to have 8.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to move $10,000, into the city council under some kind of label of
That's-
generic
Sure.
committee access. I don't care what you call it, but have it generic, and so that when committees came to the council and needed funding,
For climate change?
no, there's no specific subject, but climate change could be one of many. Do I have a second?
Second that.
There's a second by Mr. Armstrong or Mr. Mark?
Rick.
Mr. Mark. Can we just notify those people that say, hey, you have to come back? No. Yes. Ms.
Could I make just a small comment? That I would imagine that this would go through the Sustainability Committee, of which we just recently added one person to that committee, which means they only now have a quorum. So we'll see how fast they,
Yeah, right.
I just want to respond to that. Maybe
Give them
it
something.
might not be
Ms.
able
Steer.
to get there fast enough.
Walke,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Armstrong,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Harlan, Hinton,
Yep.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hohenbaum,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Norikis,
Yes.
Oxenholt,
Yes.
Parsons,
Yep.
and Starmer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, wonderful. Number 15, the purchase property of cottage cluster development for the price of $800,000, which Mr. Chandler said,
Nope.
could we do something else? All right, and then,
Chair?
sir,
Mr. Chairman?
I said, yes, sir.
This has to do with Newport's request.
Okay.
I would move that we accept staff recommendation to, I don't know where that money comes from, to tell you the truth, the 28,000 and odd change.
Probably from contingents, from the
Contracted
fund balance,
services.
appropriated fund balance.
To possibly support Newport's request for Lincoln City's contribution to the Mid-Coast Water Partnership Plan.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second. We have discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Sir.
I had concerns when I read the letter because I didn't think it spelled out very well the purpose of the contribution.
Sure.
But my gut sense is that it's an important project that we should be a part of.
Sure.
Councilor Hinton and I just saw a traumatizing presentation from the Newport Public Works Director on how dire the situation is in our neighboring community, Newport, for their future water needs.
Sure.
And it's startling.
Sure.
And I think there are going to have to be regional solutions.
Sure.
In many areas, water being one of them. I think it's vital that Lincoln City take part in that.
Me too.
And then, to be clear, this is not to be spent after, but after investigation and further clarification.
If that's part of the
Right.
motion?
Was it part of the motion?
I'm sorry. say-
Not to be spent immediately, but after.
Just to set this aside so that we can hear from Newport.
Wouldn't it come back to the council, though, for just spending 28,000 anyway?
It would be coming back to the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Part of the budget.
Any further discussion? All right, Ms. Steer, may we have a roll call, please?
Anderson,
Yes.
Armstrong,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Harlan, Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hohenbaum,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Norikis,
Yes?
Oxenholt,
Yes.
Parsons,
Yes.
Starmer,
Yes.
and Walke.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, we have two more motions.
I've got one.
Oh, okay.
I move that the Budget Committee ask City Council to consider a gas tax specifically in the city of Lincoln City to cover road repair and maintenance and new construction.
All right.
Second?
All right, there's been a motion and a second. We have discussion?
I guess, if I can, Mr. Chair, I like the broadness of it, and I don't know what this commits. You know, it's a motion to the council or advisory to council, but my sense is the expectation of the voting public would feel better if they had a direct, more definitive use of the money. And that's why I've talked about it before as a assist in the development of two primary roads, one Highland Boulevard through Nelscott East, and the other being a road from Rhodes End to East Devil's Lake across the northern part of the, and because I'd have no idea how much funds would be generated, but it's not going to be enough to do much. But coupled with, you know, urban growth or urban renewal district and our normal funding, and it's a great topic when anybody talks to you about congestion on 101. You know, paving more streets or building more sidewalks isn't going to help congestion on 101, but these two roads would add to elimination of congestion. I just think it plays better on a PR piece. So I like the idea. I would just narrow the focus.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I just want to echo Mr. Anderson, but in a little stronger way. I do think we all ought to keep in mind that if we start talking about a gas tax, none of us are going to be winning popularity contests around here, okay? That's all I'm saying.
You see my long hair.
Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
So gas tax, you've increased the rates of water, sewer. You increased the community center rates. We pay more for gas, sometimes 30 to 40 cents more than the valley. And I think if there was a way for locals not to have to pay it and hit the visitors, the people coming in through summer and that would be better taken to the community than another tax.
Mr. Chair, I agree. I don't know what this is a policy statement that has to be worked out by council as they propose something. So your points are well taken, and I think some of those things can be done with just a period of time when a tax arises. Newport does that now, a high season tax. So
Newport has it both on and off season.
Right.
And they're still cheaper than us.
Right.
Explain that.
Mr. Chair, I would be a yes if it was specific, as Councilor Mayor Anderson has described it. I'd be a no if it's just a general gas tax.
This is a recommendation from the budget
I
committee.
understand, but I'd be, on the recommendation, I would be a yes or a no based on. So if the motion stays at just a general gas tax, I just want to explain why I would vote the way I did.
Okay. Wonderful. Any further discussion? Mr. I'm sorry, yes? No?
Please repeat the motion.
Motion was to recommend to the city council that they explore the idea of a gas tax specifically to support street funding, repair, and maintenance.
All right. Ms. Steer?
Armstrong,
No.
Casper,
No.
Harlan,
No.
Hinton.
It's a tough one. May I ask a question? Not.
I think the
I'm
question.
going to say yes then.
Okay.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Hohenbaum?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Norikis?
No.
Oxenholt?
No.
No.
Parsons? Starmer?
No.
Walke?
No.
And Anderson?
No.
Motion fails.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I'd make a motion with, same motion, but only narrow the focus to just 2 new developments, 2 new roads.
To
As
which
previous.
2 roads?
Called Highland Boulevard through the Foothills Boulevard, thank you. Foothills Boulevard east of Nelscott Gap, and a roads end to East Devils Lake 101, cut across the north part of Lincoln City.
But would it be Logan Road? No.
No,
It's Salisbury.
to be named.
Oh, this is for the creation of.
Creation of, both these are creation of.
Oh, that I did not hear. Okay. Okay. Motion, was there a second?
I'll second that. Could I ask a question? I guess we don't need to have it in the motion, but the idea, as I understand it, was that we were looking at a seasonal gas
Yeah.
tax.
If you want that added, if,
That would be part of the study.
yeah.
Is it for locals?
Oh, my God.
Up to the council.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you get this.
I'm sorry, all we're asking is to have the staff look into this and come back to us with this information so that the council can consider it.
Well,
That
let
was
me
not the-
correct that a little bit.
Yeah.
What you're asking is the council to consider this. The council can then ask the staff
Right.
to work on it. So just a little correction in procedure.
Fine, thank you.
For the creation of 2 roads. All right. Any further discussion?
It's not a budget matter.
I'm just asking if there's more discussion. Okay. Still, we have a roll call, please.
Okay. Casper?
No.
Harlan?
Yes.
Hinton?
Yes.
Hoagland?
No.
Hohenbaum? Mark?
Yes?
Norikis?
Yes?
Oxenholt?
No.
Parsons?
No.
Starmer?
Yes.
Walke?
No.
Anderson?
Yes.
Armstrong?
Yes.
Squeaks.
Motion passes.
All right. Wonderful. Any further yes, sir?
The only other one I had was lowering, actually reducing expenses on chemicals
Sure,
in
I
the
saw
community.
that, but I wasn't sure if that
Yeah.
required a motion to reduce.
Does that,
Would you just put that into the unappropriated fund balance then, or?
It would require a motion.
It does require a motion?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can't change anything.
Okay.
so
Mr. Anderson.
a motion to reduce the expenditures of chemicals in the community cost center from down to 5,000, or reduce it by 5,000.
Second.
We have a discussion for this? Ms. Steer, may we have a roll call, please?
Harlan?
Yes.
Hinton?
Yes.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Hohenbaum?
No.
Mark? Norikis?
Yes?
Oxenholt?
Yes.
Parsons?
Yes.
Starmer?
Yes.
Walke?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Armstrong?
Yes.
And Casper?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right.
Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair, what page is that line item on? Can you tell me?
Yes.
Oh, here, maybe I got a 70. So it's on,
Is it on page 72?
It's too far.
it's either 71 or 70, yeah, page 72, kind of
we
middle, way
reduced it.
down where it says chemicals. The proposed amount is 17,550, so the approved amount would be 12,550.
Thank you.
All right, so we have two more that I have a little handwritten note for the tax levy and the sewer bond. I don't have the full language there, Ms. Bridges.
So one of the duties of the Budget Committee is to set the property tax rate. So we would need a motion to approve. If you wanted to use the proposed rate, that would be $4.0996 per $1,000 of assessed value, and also the dollar amount that we are assessing for the sewer bond, which is $1,557,000, and that those two are shown on page 3.
Is that one motion, Ms. Bridges?
It can be, yeah.
So moved.
Second.
We have a so move and a second. All right, Ms. Walke. All right, thank you, Mr. Noriakis. All right, may we have a roll call, please?
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hollenbaum,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Norikis,
Yes.
Oxenholt,
No.
Yes.
Parsons, Starmer,
Yes.
Walke,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Armstrong,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
and Harlan.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Wonderful. Do we have anything else? Mr. Anderson? No?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I'd like to do is we're closing to still get you to the Blazer game on time, is in all sincerity thank all of us for serving, especially the 7 citizens. Counselors, you deserve it, but citizens, and quite frankly, I would hope that Kevin and Chester, you both realize your terms expired, and I'd encourage you to re-enlist, as they would say. Would love to have you back on just because of the time you spent and, quite frankly, your knowledge of the budget. It helps rather than always having to re-expose people. So thank you all for your service.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. I would do the same thing. I thank all of you and staff. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Before you break,
Yes, sir.
I would like to say that I enjoy this process immensely, but I was a little taken aback to come tonight and have a discussion having taken place offline and a proposal at the beginning of the meeting that wipes out the study that we'd done and planning we'd done in advance. And for people who don't process quickly and need time to think through and read through things, that was a very unfair thing to have happen tonight.
Fair enough.
More than unfair, I
would
think it's
second that.
illegal.
That was, took me back.
Right, I understand. Thank you, and if we can, improve that process.
So, and Chair, any responses to the different format? Because not most of you've now gone through a couple of these different packages. This had a lot more charts and graphs rather than a lot of verbiage. Any reactions to how this was laid out versus previous years?
I like the format.
Like,
I was
I
going
like
to,
pictures.
I would just recommend that we not be so stingy on space, and the pie charts could have been larger, and the type could have been larger. And
Different colors, so it would be
The
good.
colors-
I'm trying to compress it all onto one
Not three
page.
different
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just, it would be better to fill up a page.
Yeah.
Or
and
to
so
go
that we
onto 2
could-
pages instead of...
Right,
And
right.
Mr.
And some of the colors were a little too close to my old eyes.
Too close, they were the same.
They were all gray.
I have another comment, and I've already passed this on to our budget manager there. But when on the page that we talk about the TRT, in the past budgets, there has been the language from our charter that shows the percentages of a percentage goes here, and the other percents go here, and that wasn't in this budget. No,
about
it
the-
just has the dollar amount. It does, no.
You talking
It's
about
right
the
here.
flow
It
chart?
doesn't say it.
No, it
It doesn't
doesn't.
say it. On page 5.
It doesn't, but anyway, I think it should. I've been asked about that from citizens, and thought I could have a quick answer by looking at my budget book, and nope.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chair, as one of those new budget members that had to be brought up to speed, but I've looked at a lot of budgets in the past, public budgets, and I just really appreciated the way it was laid out by program, and that there were priorities, so that I had some clue as to the roadmap. That was really helpful.
That is a good point. Yes, Ms. Harlan.
That's something new Ron did this year, and
Yeah.
he spent a lot of time on it. I think it came out really great.
Getting better. Yeah, wonderful. I really thank you guys very much. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we're adjourned.
And thank you.
And it's not 11:30.
Smoother than last year.
Woo-hoo.
We didn't have $1 million.
Thank you, guys. Kathy, what, just leave this?
Oh, yes.
That's right. I haven't run by your house in a while, but I'm building back up to it.
It's at 2 a.m. It's been a while.
And I think we have.
I can, get a little.
And it won't be adds to it.
It might be. I can-